the events this week, talking paranormal, of course?
Crikey, there's so many to choose from. Of course, Matt collapsing in the location last night was very, very worrying. I know Matt, and I know he's not the kind of person to just drop down like that.
But similarly, Chris Conway, a couple of nights ago,
Conway, I was just
effectively
about to
blacked out, and he's our medium. He's out there. It's never happened to him before.
Exactly, and I was speaking to him, because I see him in the daytime and we go for lunch and that kind of thing. I was speaking to him, and he was totally overwhelmed and shocked by what happened to him. Experiment-wise, I think the Yvette's kind of theory of the ultrasound could prove very, very promising if further research is done into that.
Let's not forget, Kieran had 5 secret words, and they were spelt out by the glass, and nobody but Kieran and the person who typed them onto the screen knew what they were. That was an amazing result, and he's still analysing that data.
Yeah, yes.
Brian, how about for you? Because you've had some amazingly specific hits on names. You had the name Thomas Reynolds from you again last night, and we didn't get a chance to get it out of you. What's been your standout moment?
Well, I mean, let's start off by saying what an incredible week. I mean, you know, everyone's seen the show. The moment for me, I think, was when the team went up to the Ashton Memorial, probably, onto, of course, Gallows Hill, the place where lots of people met their end.
Because let's not forget, after London, this was known as the hanging city, because more people were hanged here than anywhere else in the country apart from London.
Absolutely. And you think of the amount of people that met their end on the end of a rope up there on Gallows Hill. And it's from there, I think, that there's a real source of energy, of evil energy, that tends to spread out and touch most of this area.
Now, we're going to find out your face of evil you've sensed tonight later on, but of the people we've met so far, and it's quite a checklist of evil, we've had, for example, the Beast, the Butcher, blood-soaked murderer, we had the brutal jailer, the hanging judge, the sorcerer, and then last night's twisted witches. Who have been the most dangerous, would you say?
Well, certainly one of the interesting was the doctor, of course, Buck Ruxton, who was involved in double murder here and disposal of bodies, particularly nasty character. But once again, I'm going to go back. I'm going to back to that hill on the Ashton Memorial and think of, you know, one of the matriarchs of the families, the feuding families, all witches, and I'm thinking of Elizabeth Southern's Old Demdike. It just sticks in my memory. So there's something about it. There's something overriding about that. This place is steeped in witchcraft, frankly, and that really, you know, leaves something with me. I don't know. Just can't get it out of my mind, that whole thing.
Okay, let's talk about Brian's intuitions there. If we return to your area of expertise, Phil, which is physical manifestations, we've had a lot of people falling sick, feeling frightened, feeling ill. What do you think was the most frightening night, the most threatening night?
Certainly when Matt had his collapse, and not only Matt, most of the team were being affected.
Simon was affected, Carl was affected, Kath felt really odd.
Exactly. And again, going back a few nights when Kath had her experience and she basically screamed the house down. I've known Kath for a while, I've never ever heard her do that and get that affected by something that she was experiencing.
Great to talk to you both again. Let's find out now what you are sensing at home. Here he is again, Julian Clegg. Julian.
Thanks, Paul. I thought we'd sum up what's been happening all week, because it has been an extraordinary 7 nights we've had so far, and I know night 8 is going to be no exception as well. And just go through the themes of each night. And first of all, night 1, in the Winter Gardens we were, and of course the Beast, or the Hangman, was the theme of the evening. Lots of activity in the basement, which is where we've sent many of our audience members for solar vigils, and I think they'll agree it's pretty active down there. Lots of reaction from people in the audience who have been coming up to me and Paul and telling us what's happened to them as well, including brushing around people's legs, strange smells. Also at this experience where it feels like a finger's being moved around on the top of people's hands, which is very unusual. So interactivity here in the audience as well as from you at home. Also, the biggest consistent theme of night 1 was the repeated sightings of groups of figures seen around the table and chairs in the dressing rooms here at the Winter Gardens. Webcam 3 that night was the busiest, so thank you very much indeed for your feedback on that. Now, day 2, Lancaster Town Hall and Palatine Hall, the theme of the night, the Butcher. People could hear the phones ringing. This became a theme, of course, for the rest of the week. People continue to hear old-fashioned phones right up until last night, even when the phones were off the hook. Fascinating. And there were sightings of a judge sat in the judge's chair in the courtroom in the town hall. Then day 3, the Alhambra, the murder, of course, was a theme that night, and lots of sightings of spirits and men in military uniforms. poltergeist activity in the ladies' toilet when the door handle moved up and down, and this is in line with various reports of haunted activity there as well. And lots of concern from those at home for the female members of the team, as Walter Clayton, the murderer, of course, hated women. Now, day 4, Ashton Hall, the theme of the night, the jailer. There were sightings of a man in the corridor when Yvette was left behind in there. In fact, that webcam was the most popular webcam of the night, not surprisingly, because Yvette was on her own. It was a very moving and troubling moment, wasn't it? Many of our texts and reports through the website expressed a lot of concern for Yvette, of course. And sightings that night of the floating grey-white lady, generally thought to be the jailer's wife. The theme of a grey-white lady or ghost is common when we come to Lancashire, interestingly. Day 5, the judge's lodgings. The judge, of course, and many of you locked into the name Thomas very quickly that night. Was this an indication of how strongly his spirit haunted the lodgings, I wonder, and sightings of a figure on the bed and a child in the schoolroom. Day 6, the 3 mariners and Ashton Memorial, of course. The sorcerer, our theme that night, and a lady stood behind the bar. This is commonly reported as the ghost in the Mariners, and it's nice to see that our webcam viewers spotted that lady too, and lots of orbs on the table in the restaurant, especially while the team were doing the flower experiment. And of course, during the Tesla experiment, lots of hooded and crouched women around the Faraday cages, which is another theme of that night. And then last night, Snatchams and the Maritime Museum, day 7, of course, and the theme, the smuggler. Lots of spirits hiding from the team at the museum. If you recall, the team felt the same thing, interestingly. Lots of spirits and naval uniforms at the museum, and there was poltergeist activity in the storeroom of the museum, including objects moving on the shelves. Lots of good luck messages coming in too for tonight, by the way. Jane from Essex, Stuart from Crawley, Melanie from Carlisle. Thank you so much for those. The website, of course, mosthauntedlive.net. We'll go through the webcams for tonight a little bit later. But for the moment, Paul, back to you.
Thank you, Julian. Well, any information that comes either from people at home or from the team out at the visual locations is researched and cross-referenced by our experts. We have historian Dr. John Callow, demonologist and master of the arcane arts Fred Batt, wearing matching jackets, it looks like tonight, very fetching indeed. Yeah. John, let's start with you. What's been your most memorable night? As a historian, what's been the most satisfying to talk about?
Well, I think over the course of the week we've had some wonderful snapshots of 1,000 years of the history of Lancaster and Morecambe. It's incredibly rich stuff. Everything from the Romans to Crusaders to hanging judges, witches, and into the modern day. I think really for me last night, that very evocative picture of Sunderland Point, the slaves, 29,000 coming through Lancaster, and just one life illuminated. And that idea that the show has allowed us to get back to individual lives, to give people voices that maybe they didn't have in life. So it's a profoundly democratic and interesting process.
Also, we've examined a comparatively recent case for Most Haunted Live, which was the murder, the dreadful double murder committed by Dr. Buck Ruxton in, I think, 1935. Yeah. And that enabled you to shed a bit of light on the problems faced people immigrating into this country in the 30s. That was an amazing night.
That was a terrific night, and you can see as well that history is not so much about continuity, but about change. This country is always changing, developing, growing, but it's our common endeavour that makes the story all the richer, all the more important for us.
But always rooted in the past.
But always rooted in the past. And also, when we look at the crimes, I think what's been very clear and fascinating for me is the different types of crime. We've looked at murders, people in the most terrible hours and minutes of their lives, but we've had crimes of hot blood, Buck Ruxton, Walter Clayton, but we've also had crimes of cold blood, the slave traders who profited and enriched themselves from misery. And I think people might want to reflect just on which was the worst.
Thank you for the moment, John. Fred, let's turn to you now. Fred, what's been the most impressive night for you? What's struck, I would almost say, what struck most fear into you, but I know you're above fear, but what's most interested you?
Well, there's been a few. First of all, we had the figure 8 that kept coming up, which is no beginning, no end, infinity, the afterlife. That was good. We had the Ouija sessions where you were on there, became emotional. The next night, I was standing outside and Carl said, "You okay?" And I had tears coming down my face, which is, I never do that. I mean, it's really strange. We also had DEW come out on the Ouija board, which sometimes the W was used instead of V. And the next one to come out was 666, so it could have been Devil coming out, which was good. Old Demdike, her granddaughter, they came through. Brian also, which we didn't have time to say on air, he picked up Reynolds. Thomas Reynolds was a sailor, and there was a witch around this area called Morag. She used to give protection to the sailors before they went out to sea, and he didn't pay her, so she caused his ship to be wrecked on Morecambe Sands. And so that was quite good.
A lot of information coming out.
Yeah.
Can you very quickly, Fred, tell us why, forget Halloween, why this time of the year, these phases of the moon are so important to witchcraft?
Well, there's a very good reason. We're in this area, the element of water, we're right on water, and the water is in the west of the circle or the pentagram or whatever. So we're in the west of England, near water. The moon rules the tides and our emotions, which could explain you on the Ouija board. The full moon is on Monday and ends on Thursday, but the moon has 6 phases. The first day of that phase is tonight, which is Samhain, Halloween. Doing any sort of spell on a full moon near water would be so powerful, and tonight the team really should wear protection.
Thank you for the moment, Fred. Cautionary words indeed. This is Most Haunted Live. The investigation will start here tonight in this theatre very soon indeed, and we're going to be back before you know it. It's Halloween. It's Most Haunted Live, 8 Faces of Evil, and you join us at the